data for these survivorship curves. What are these? So I'm just going to do a little example here, or an illustration. So let's say I was studying a population from the 1900s. I would actually, there's not a lot on computers right back then, so I would actually go out to an old cemetery. Sounds kind of strange, but that's where they collect this data. So we go out to an old cemetery, and let's say I found 12. There's 12 of these. Let's say I found 12 tombstones where everybody was born in 1900. So basically, according to this, in this area with these tombstones, there were 12 babies born. So that starting point, 1900. If you look, they were all born in 1900. There's 12 of them. That's our starting point. All right. So I can also make a data table of that. It's called a life table, like who was alive. So I've got the age, 0, because that's babies are born. They're 0 years old. There's 12 of them. And then I want to track over the years. When do they die? Do they die when they're 5, 10, 15? It'll give me an indication of like what their life expectancy was. How long do they expect to live? What was infant mortality rate like? So I'm going to look, and I'm going to go in 10-year intervals. You can do 5 years, 20 years, I guess, but 10 is kind of typical. So I'm going to go in 20-year intervals. I'm sorry, 10. I apologize, 10-year intervals. So I'm going to look, and I'm going to say, okay, in 1910, how many of these 12 individuals survived and how many died? So let's see. All right. So in 1910, let me see. All right, well, this 1906, so that person died before 10. 1912, no, they're still living. Ooh, 1905. So this person died before, or during this 1900 and 19. Oh, sorry. Oops. 1900 and 1910, those two died. Oh, 1901 died. 1902. 1922, no, 28, 26, 15, oh, 1906. Oh, and then 1910 is like right on the dot there. So basically there are 6 of the original 12 people, put them up here, they all died in between 1900 and 1910. So basically they did not survive past 10 years old. They died here. Oh, it's okay, Cynthia, no worries. So basically, by this point, 6 of the original 12 died. All right, so in my table here, from 1900 to 1910 is 10 years. 12 were born, but by 1910, 6 of them had died. Okay. Okay. So here's a question. How many were alive or survived to be 11 years old? So 12 were born in 1900, 6 of them died by 1910 or 1910. How many were alive in 1911? How many survived to be 11? Well, 12 minus 6 is 6, right? So in 1911, these people were still alive. Those people were still alive. So 6 of them survived to be 11. So you'd say 6 survivors. So that's what they call them, survivorship curves, because who died versus who survived. So these 6 survived. All right. Well, what about the next 10 years? What the next 10 years? Let's say to 1920. Right? How many of them survived versus how many died? So let's see. Oh, 1912. That's in there. 1915. Ooh, 1924, they lived. 26, they lived. 28. Ooh, 22, that's pretty good. So these two, 1915 and 1912, 2. So 2 died. 2 died. So how many lived to 1921? Well, there were 6 alive at 11, but by 1920, 2 more had died. Right? 2 more had died. So how many lived to 1921? 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because 6 minus 2 is 4. So 4 survivors. So I'm kind of seeing it. So I'm like, okay. So how many survived to be 21? 6 minus 2, 4. And then the last one, because you guys are probably like, I got this. 1930, how many died versus how many survived? Well, let's see. Ooh, 1924, they didn't make it. 1926, they didn't make it. 28, they didn't make it. And 22. So 4 died for 1930. Right? Oh, wait a minute. There were only 4 left. So if 4 died, how many made it to 1931? 4 minus 4 is 0. They were all gone by that point. So it's called the life table, and it can give you an idea of like who survived different age groups. Like, did they die young? Did they die old? Do they have a high infant mortality rate? So these data tables for the assignment are truly called life tables. You can probably see a little better here. So I've got the age groups, who survived versus who died. So, okay, this first one is 1850. They had records, or from a cemetery actually, 1,000 babies were born. But by 10, 104 of them had died. So 1,000 minus 104 means 896 survived to be 11. But by age 20, 36 had died. So 896 minus 36 means 860 survived to be 21. Kind of take a second. I just think it's important to know where this data came from or what it means. So take a second, see if that like sort of makes sense, like what this is and what it means. If you have any questions, let me know. All right, well then what do you do with this data? You make these curves or graphs. So I've got this life table, and I want to make what's called a survivorship curve. So I've got here alive and dead. Well, the fancy words for died or dead is mortality. And for still alive, it's called survivorship. Who survived? Oops, I can fit it. Survivorship. So if I want to make a survivorship curve, I'm going to graph the age versus who survived. I don't need that. That's just to kind of help me figure out like who died versus who survived. I'm going to graph that. I'm like, okay. I put the age groups here, and my biggest number is 12, so I need this to go to 12. So I'm like, okay. So 0 to 10, there were 12 people alive. So I'm like 0 to 10, 12 people were alive. 11 to 26, 11 to 26, 21 to 30, there were 4. And then 31, there were 0. That is a survivorship curve. The age versus who survived. So you are going to make a graph for 1850, 1950, 2006. And you're only graphing what I highlighted in green. So the age versus this column, the survivorship, ignore mortality. So survivorship. You can do it in your notebook. You can do it if you know how to use Excel on the computer, whatever you prefer. I did it in my notebook. I did one for you. So I did 1850. This one. So I've got age, and then I did 100, skip a line, 200, skip a line. I had to get to 1,000. This one. I'm like, okay, 0 to 10 is 1,000. 0 to 10, 1,000. 11 to 20, 896. 896. 31 to 40, 860. And then I connected them with a purple kind of blue pencil, and I wrote 1850. So then I would need to get a green pencil, and I would graph the data for 1950. I would get a red pencil and graph the data for 2006. So in the end, you're going to have 3 lines on the same graph. 3 lines on the same graph. And then the questions, bulleted points are absolutely fine. They're just kind of like what's happening in the different country or different time periods. I'm sorry, time periods. And that's where the kind of the background information will become helpful. I think here it'll help you with the questions.